All right, let's talk about HR. And I mean, let's really talk about it. If you think human resources is just about paperwork and policies, well, you're going to want to stick around because today HR is playing a whole new game. It's about power, it's about purpose, and it's really about building the entire soul of a company. We're diving into HR's modern mandate, and trust me, the stakes have never been higher. So let me ask you something right off the bat. What is HR's real job these days? Is it still just about managing the paperwork, or has it become something more? I think for a lot of us, the image of filing cabinets and rule books comes to mind. But the truth, the role of HR has exploded, and it's way more strategic than you might think. We're going to get into just how deep that change really goes. Okay, so here's what we've got on tap. First, we're going to look at why HR suddenly has this super important high-stakes role. Then we'll break down the three big pillars that every modern HR department is built on: ethics, social responsibility, and, of course, diversity. And to wrap it all up, we'll look at how you take these huge ideas and actually put them into practice. So let's jump right into part one. It helps to think of it like this. For a long time, companies were kind of like these private castles. HR was just managing stuff inside the walls. But today, well, thanks to things like social media and the 24/7 news cycle, those castle walls are basically made of glass now. Everybody, I mean employees, customers, investors, you name it, they're all looking in. They're watching every single move. And that kind of intense scrutiny has yanked HR right out of the back office and plunked it down in the strategic spotlight. And believe me, the stakes are huge. On one hand, you got the risks. Mess up even once, and you could be looking at a PR disaster, expensive lawsuits, and a wave of your best people heading for the exit. It can literally bleed a company dry. But get it right, and you build this incredible fortress of trust. You create a place that doesn't just attract the best talent, but gets them genuinely excited to come to work every day. So what's the takeaway here? This stuff isn't just a nice to have anymore. It is a core strategy for survival. All right, let's dig into our first pillar, and this one is the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about: ethics. Now, I want to be super clear here. This is not just about following the law. That's the starting line, the absolute bare minimum. What we're really talking about is a deep, proactive commitment to doing what's right, especially when nobody's looking. So what does ethics in HRM really mean in practice? The best way to think about it is like a company's DNA. It's that invisible code that shapes every single decision. I mean, from who you hire to how you handle a really tough layoff. It's all about weaving fairness, honesty, and respect so deeply into the fabric of the culture that it just becomes second nature. It goes way, way beyond just checking a legal box. And why does this matter so much? Well, the payoff is just huge. First off, it builds trust. Real, solid trust between employees and the people in charge. And that trust is basically the fuel for any great team. Of course, when you're operating with high ethical standards, you're naturally protecting yourself from legal headaches. Plus, having a great reputation, that's like a magnet for top talent. At the end of the day, you're creating a place where people don't just show up for a paycheck. They actually thrive. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. These big, academic-sounding ethical theories, they're not just for textbooks. They're actually a super practical toolkit for HR. Take the utilitarian approach, for example. That's all about doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So, a tough restructure that saves the company, that's a utilitarian decision. Then you have a rights-based view, which says certain things are non-negotiable, like an employee's right to privacy with their medical records. Or the justice and fairness approach, making sure promotions are based on consistent criteria. And finally, care ethics, which is all about empathy, supporting an employee through a tough time. It's about having all these different lenses to look through when you're facing a tough call. Okay, so we've got our internal ethical house in order. Now for our second pillar, we're going to look outward. We're talking about corporate social responsibility. You've probably heard it called CSR. This is where a company fundamentally shifts its thinking. It stops asking only, how do we make more money, and starts asking a much bigger question. How can we be a positive force in the world? And what is CSR, really? At its heart, it's a choice. It's a company saying, you know what, we're going to hold ourselves accountable, not just to our investors, but to society as a whole and to the planet. It's all voluntary. Think about a tech giant pouring money into renewable energy, or a clothing company making absolutely sure its supply chain is ethical. It's this recognition that you're not operating in a bubble. You're part of a much bigger ecosystem. And the impact of doing this well, it is absolutely massive. People today, and let's be honest, especially younger generations, they don't just want a paycheck. They want to work for a company that stands for something.
So a strong CSR program acts like a beacon, pulling in amazing talent and keeping them engaged. It just goes to show you purpose and profit are not enemies. In fact, in today's world, purpose is one of the biggest drivers of profit. And that brings us perfectly to our third and final pillar, the one that really ties everything together. This is all about building a workplace that doesn't just tolerate differences, but celebrates them, that actively uses our unique backgrounds as a massive source of strength. Yep, we are talking about diversity and inclusion. Now, it is so important to understand the difference between these two words, because a lot of people mix them up. I love this analogy. Diversity is getting an invitation to the party. It's about the mix of people you have. But inclusion? That's being asked to dance once you're there. It's about creating a place where every single person feels valued, feels heard, and feels like they truly belong. You can have the most diverse team on paper, but if you don't have inclusion, you're not getting any of the benefits. And when you get both diversity and inclusion right, wow, it is a game changer. I mean, the research is crystal clear on this. Diverse teams consistently outperform teams where everyone thinks and looks the same, especially when it comes to creativity and innovation. Why? Because you're tackling problems from all these different angles. Plus, an inclusive culture builds incredible loyalty. It opens you up to a much bigger pool of talent, and it just makes your company a place where the absolute best people want to work. Okay, so we've got our three pillars: a strong ethical foundation, a commitment to social responsibility, and a focus on diversity and inclusion. That's all great in theory, right? But how does an HR team actually make this stuff happen in the real world? Let's get practical and look at the actual tools they use. So imagine HR is faced with a really tricky ethical problem. They don't just guess or go with their gut. There's a process. First, they have to clearly identify what the issue is. Then, they brainstorm all the different ways they could handle it. A really crucial step is thinking about the impact, not just on the company, but on employees, customers, everyone involved. And finally, they make a choice that lines up with the company's core values. It's a structured, thoughtful approach.
And when it comes to making diversity and inclusion a reality, HR has a whole toolbox of strategies. Things like overhauling the recruitment process to remove bias, so you're hiring based on skill, period. Or running ongoing training to help us all recognize our own unconscious biases. They also foster things called employee resource groups, or ERGs, which are amazing for building community. And of course, they implement inclusive policies like flexible work and track the data to see if what they're doing is actually working. It's all about taking action.
Because at the end of the day, there's a saying in business: what gets measured gets managed. And that is so true here. A modern HR team isn't just hoping for the best, they are obsessed with data. They're running pay equity audits to make sure compensation is fair. They're tracking diversity metrics like crazy. They're using employee engagement surveys to get a pulse on the culture. And all this data isn't just to fill up a report. It's the engine that drives real accountability and real change.
So as we bring this all together, I want to leave you with one final thought to take back to your own workplace. Ask yourself this: is your company just playing defense? Is the goal to just manage liability and stay out of trouble? Or is it playing offense? Is it actively, intentionally trying to build a legacy, one that's positive, ethical, and truly inclusive? Because honestly, the answer to that question is probably going to define its entire future.
Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer from Apex Academy. If you got something valuable out of it, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like the video and subscribe to our channel for more content just like this.